Saying it sounds very strong, but yes, a recession, that is, an economic crisis, is totally inevitable and even necessary if we do not want everything to jump out of the air. And in fact, some good job data right now are terrible news for the markets. But why? Well, this video is about that. Today we will see why there will be an economic crisis in 2023, why it is necessary that it is there so that our economy enjoys good long-term health. We will also see how it has come this far and, above all, what we can do individually to protect ourselves from a crisis of these characteristics. Let's start by seeing how this whole thing started. The 2008 crisis hit very hard in many places in the world, especially in the United States and Europe. So to recover from such a tremendous crisis, the central banks lowered the types of interest, putting them very close to zero, and even became negative. What does this mean? Well, the central banks thought that by leaving almost free money to companies and citizens, they would begin to invest and consume so that the economy would begin to reactivate again. So the operation was simple. The central banks printed money roundly and the consumers and companies spent again. Industries such as construction, tourism, or large technologies benefited from the fact that consumers finally had money again and were able to spend more. Companies were also able to invest in new machinery, in building new factories, invest more money in marketing, or hire more staff. All this money savings caused many companies to rise exponentially in the stock market. Suddenly everyone wanted to invest in the large businesses of technology companies such as Google, Facebook, or Apple, while other investors, eager to play, decided to opt for more risky business models such as Tesla, which in 2018 still did not give benefits. Others directly began to speculate in assets or businesses that had nothing behind them, such as many cryptocurrencies. The central banks began to notice the situation. The world economy was getting out of hand with so much printing money, and prices were starting to rise alarmingly. Something had to be done so that the economy stopped overheating. So neither short nor lazy, the central banks, with the Fed of the United States and the European Central Bank at the head, began to raise the types of interest so that the thing was not out of the way. Raising the types of interest is an intelligent option when the economy is overheated, since if people or companies have to pay a higher interest for their loans or their mortgage, it is very possible that more than one or two people think about it before asking for loan money. And if people do not ask for loan money, the economy slows down, since they invest less in new factories, houses, or cars. The rise in types worked. The economy seemed to be in full shape, but without being excessively overheated. However, March 2020 arrived and everything was going to kick up. Well, yes, in a few days COVID took over the planet and paralyzed the economies of almost everyone. Houston, we have a problem. Almost from night to morning, companies with essential businesses could only produce for the functioning of the country. Tourism stopped dry, the hotel closed, and millions of businesses suffered the consequences in one way or another. Seeing the situation, the governments and central banks had to act, or the humanitarian catastrophe was served. This time, the mission was to maintain the global economy afloat, even if it was artificially, until the situation was resolved. And how? Very easy. Returning to flooding the economy of money. As had happened in 2008, governments responded to the crisis by announcing large public spending programs. For example, the European Union announced the Next Generation Funds, which is nothing more than an investment of €750 billion to face the consequences of the pandemic. The United States also launched several public spending plans, such as a $550 billion infrastructure plan. But of course, this money had to be taken out of somewhere, and above all, it had to be very, very cheap. In addition, economists needed that, despite the fact that people were in their homes or having many sectors of the economy stopped, people continued to consume and companies invested. And all this was only going to be achieved by printing money with very low interest rates, so much so that they could even be negative. At first, the strategy worked well for both central banks and governments. The economists, very damaged by COVID, managed to recover in record time, and the markets recovered in just 6 months since the pandemic broke out. Tremendous. injecting so much money into a global economy that had already presented symptoms of being reheated was going to end up paying. They go for today, hunger for tomorrow. The drunkenness of dollars and euros that were printed during COVID and got into the system was going to leave us a great recession in the form of inflation, that is, in the form of prices rising. But this was not the only reason why prices were going to rise. We were about to witness the perfect storm. Well, yes, we have already seen the expansionary monetary policies, that is, the drop in interest rates and the printing of money as one of the reasons why prices rose. Now let's see the other two big reasons. The second has been the bottlenecks in the production chains. Let's explain this. There were many industries whose production stopped during the COVID crisis. For example, many mines closed, either because their workers got sick or because the authorities in those countries did not authorize mining workers to go to their jobs, causing a great shortage of strategic minerals. The same happened with some Chinese ports that were blocked due to closures and confinements. It was also a series of droughts or floods that caused a shortage of food worldwide. The problem that so many things were missing is that when there is a shortage, prices rise. To illustrate this, we are going to put the example of a mineral that began to scarce in international markets, silica. As silica rose in price, the price of fertilizers also rose, causing some foods to also see their price increased. When the price of silica rose, the prices of windows or products as basic in construction as silicone also rose. All microchips are made of silica, so when the price of silica rose, the price of microchips also rose, and when the price of microchips also rose, the price of all electronic products also rose. In short, a real madness. And when it seemed that things were not going to get worse, and that the inflation crisis caused by the rise in prices was inevitable, the third reason why prices have risen appeared: the war between Ukraine and Russia. After the invasion of Ukraine by Russia, the Western countries put a sanction on Russia to freak out. Many of them, directed to Russia, had difficulties exporting oil and natural gas. The problem is that the West itself was the one who bought this oil. From night to morning, gas and oil were more scarce in the international market, so the prices of oil, gas, and therefore all energy rose like foam, causing even more inflation, since all transport was more expensive and all the industry that needed energy in its production process was going to produce at a higher cost. In addition, from the fertile lands of Ukraine came out a very important percentage of the worldwide consumption of cereals, which for several weeks stopped coming out. More wood for the bonfire. So the perfect storm was here, and inflation came to shoot above 9% in the United States and above 10% in the Eurozone. Or, in other words, inflation was not so high for 40 years. Well, that's how we got to the beginning of the summer of 2022, with inflation at a tremendous peak. The governments and central banks had to do something. And what did they do? Well, as the war between Russia and Ukraine was not going to end, energy importers countries, such as those of the European Union, began to look for alternatives to Russian gas and oil. They have tried to reduce their energy consumption, have enhanced renewables, and have even put a stop to the price of the Russian barrel. Even the winter of 2022 in Europe has collaborated with unusually high temperatures. Not bad, but this has only improved the inflation data related to energy. Another problem would be to solve the bottlenecks in the supply chains. These problems have not completely disappeared, but over time many suppliers have been able to increase their production. Companies have accumulated stocks, and China has been able to gradually reopen its economy and its ports. In addition, both the European Union and the United States have initiated plans to ensure the supply of some strategic components. But all this is insufficient. And it is that the biggest problem that has caused much of inflation is that great money injection that was made as a result of COVID. Well, central banks have not had another option and have made one of the most aggressive interest rates in modern history. If you are going to buy a flat in Europe at the beginning of 2023, the interests of the mortgage will be tripled if we compare it with the beginning of 2022. And in the United States, this is even greater, since there in a few months the official interest rates have gone from 0% to 4.5%. And now the question that you are probably asking yourself is, has the magic formula of raising the types of interest? Well, yes, but no. It is true that the expected economic growth has reduced a bit, and even the first massive shutdowns have been seen by large companies such as Meta, Alphabet, the Google Matrix, or Amazon. It is true that inflation seems to have hit the roof and that little by little it is descending, but it is still at very, very high levels. The fired workers are finding work, and the unemployment rate is at the lowest levels of the entire century. This means that workers continue to have money to spend, that the recession resists the arrival, and that, therefore, the economy must be slowed down more so that inflation drops. And how have we seen an economy slow down? In effect, raising the types of interest. For this reason, a very curious paradox is given right now. In order for inflation not to go out of control, we need the economy to slow down a bit. The problem is that the longer it takes to slow down, the stronger it will have to slow down, and the more there is to slow down, there is a greater risk of a great crisis. That is why, to this day, the good employment data are not good news, since they make the central bank have to hit a major shutdown, and the ball of the recession gets bigger. And it is that the role of the central banks is to find that balance in which, through the rise and fall of the types of interest, they find the perfect balance between economic growth and inflation. That is why, to this day, developed economies need a break, a small recession that ends with inflation, and that allows us to restart the machinery of economic growth as quickly as possible. Therefore, to this day, no one doubts that the recession will happen yes in 2023. So, what can you do about it? Well, first of all, it's time to control the expenses and not go crazy with scams. The types of interest right now are very high, and according to the Fed, they will be up to at least the beginning of 2024, so it is not the best time to bet. However, the good thing about recessions is that they allow you to find very good long-term investment opportunities. That is, remember that all this content is formative, that what I tell you are examples, and that in no case are investment recommendations. Before investing in the stock market, you have to do your own analysis. Well, as I said, if your idea is to invest in the long term, it could be interesting to look for quality companies that give benefits, have great competitive advantages, and are at attractive prices. Companies such as Meta, Alphabet, Nike, or PayPal have suffered major corrections without their competitive advantages being seen as very committed and also have no debt. It is important to have on the radar many of these large companies and monitor if at a given moment the market offers them to you at an attractive price. However, if what we want is to take advantage of the recession, what we have to ask ourselves is, what kind of company benefits from a recession? In this case, we have to go to the so-called defensive companies. We call defensive companies those that do not suffer from crises or that even benefit from them. And how do we know this? Well, with common sense and seeing how the different companies have behaved in previous crises. The first company we are going to talk about is Home Depot, a company that sells household goods, DIY, hardware, and this type of things. Home Depot has behaved very well in previous crises, and it makes a lot of sense. When people lose their jobs, or when they perceive that the economy is not for many crooks, or when they simply raise the price of the mortgages, people choose not to get involved in buying a house and prefer to renew their own. And for that they need the products that Home Depot offers. Another option is Walmart, and it is that the company of great stores in the United States likes to compete for price, which makes it very helpful in times of crisis where people look at every cent they spend. Also, Walmart sells that kind of thing that no matter how many crises there are, you will continue to buy cleaning products, basic electronics, clothes, and everything you use in your day-to-day. In fact, Walmart almost did not even notice the 2008 crisis or the 2020 COVID crisis. And finally, we go with the queen of hamburgers, McDonald's. The American firm continues to expand to new markets and continues to open establishments in medium and small cities. Perhaps this case is not so evident, but McDonald's has behaved very well in previous crises since its establishments replace more expensive restaurants in times of crisis. Its service is enough to provide a hobby and a pleasant experience, while they are cheap enough so that even in times of crisis, most families can afford it. And well, these are 3 investment ideas that I bring you, but remember that you must do your own analysis before investing. For the rest, a greeting and until next time.